and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Rachel Lipstein.
Rachel, introduce the audience to yourself.
Well, thank you for having me, Andy. It's a pleasure to be on the program. I'm filling in for Ann Northrup. I'm a writer and a copy editor at the New Yorker magazine, and I perform around the city occasionally. And it's a joy to be here commenting on the news and culture pertaining to
We'll
Gay
have to get
USA.
more about you have to keep us posted about your performances. Let's go to the headlines this week.
Sounds good.
We had elections this Tuesday, primaries, in 3 states, and the Vermont Democrats, in a first, nominated transgender Christine Hallquist for governor. We will bring you that and all of the election results.
And in other news, Trump's Department of Labor greenlights anti-LGBT discrimination by federal contractors. So the OFCCP is amid scrutiny right now.
Terrible. Missouri Republicans nominated another anti-LGBT, anti-Semitic Hitler sympathizer for state office.
And Illinois' Republican governor has vetoed an LGBT rights bill in expansion.
Get this, at NYU, a lesbian professor was suspended for sexually harassing a gay male graduate student.
It's an incredible story that we can't wait to talk about. In Oklahoma, parents have threatened violently on Facebook a transgender 7th grader, and the opening of the school has been delayed due to safety concerns.
Really heartbreaking story. A lesbian teacher in Indiana was disciplined by a Catholic school for marrying her partner.
And Richard Sipe, who warned the Catholic Church of abuse scandals for decades and was ignored, memorably played by Richard Jenkins in Spotlight, has died.
Yes, he has, and the same week as that big Pennsylvania scandal was uncovered, although it's not that big news because it's been going on forever. So in the elections, Christine Hallquist is the first out transgender nominee of a major party for a governorship, and this is in Vermont. She's 62 years old. She joins other LGBTQ gubernatorial candidates this year. There she is, Kate Brown in Oregon, Jared Polis in Colorado, and Lupe Valdez in Texas, all Democrats. Now she has to face this Republican incumbent, Governor Phil Scott, who is fairly popular. She got, though, half the vote. Almost half the vote in a big race. Their nearest opponent only got 22.5%. She was the CEO of the Vermont Electric Cooperative, and which is a power utility, which she saved from bankruptcy.
Default, which, our first potentially transgender governor being the CEO of, or chief executive of a corporation.
Well, she transitioned while she was there.
Right,
in 2015.
and the first apparently transgender senior executive of a large corporation as well.
Really?
Leaning in. In other news, the Department of Labor has issued a directive giving OFCCP contractors license to exercise religious freedom.
Explain what that is. What is it? The Office of what?
So it's the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs.
Yes.
That is the body sort of delegated to make sure that contractors are complying with not just anti-discrimination protections issued on the federal level, but affirmative action initiatives as well, distinguished from the EEOC, of course, that monitors non-federal contractor employees nationwide, which the Republicans tried to merge in the budget.
Right. So what they're saying to these contractors is, if you have if a contractor has religious concerns about who they're hiring and how they're providing services, you're going to be given special consideration about this. We're not rescinding Obama's executive order on LGBT rights, but they are really doing it in practice.
The most scandalous part of the story to me is that from their website, conspicuously has disappeared the guidance that clarifies that the religious freedom exemption does not license discrimination. It only allows contractors to prefer to hire someone of their own religion, but that that entire question has disappeared from the website.
Right.
So.
Now, this problem didn't start with the Trump administration. I mean, in New York City, when you get a contract, you sign something that says, I won't discriminate. But there are a lot of religious organizations that, are Agudath Israel, Catholic Charities, all these places, which are very discriminatory in many respects in the way they provide services.
Yeah.
And it's really gone too far. If you get government money, you should abide by civil laws.
Totally.
I'm going to talk about.
I mean, it's always been a fine line to tread. What's the difference between preferring to hire people of your own religion versus, implicit discrimination on the basis of gender identity, something like that. But they're not even making a show of having it on the website anymore. So it's
Right.
It really feels like
It is
emboldening. Yeah.
crusade on the part of this administration, especially Jeff Sessions. If you're ever feeling soft on him because Trump hates him so much, he's the guy behind a lot of this stuff, at the Justice Department.
If you're ever feeling soft on Jeff Sessions, check in with your local health professional.
Okay, let's give some of the other election results. That Tammy Baldwin was renominated for the U.S. Senate, and she's leading in the polls by double digits over her potential opponents. And actually, who is she? I have to look up who she's going to be facing at this point.
I don't know.
Oh yeah, it's State Senator Leah Vukmir. That's who's going to be her Republican opponent for the Senate. The Kochs are throwing a ton of money up at that. Also in Wisconsin, the anti-LGBT Milwaukee County Sheriff, Richard Schmidt, who posted all these anti-gay things because of his religion, he was defeated in the Democratic primary. In Kansas, they've certified Chris Kolbach as the nominee for governor, very anti-gay, and we're supposed to want him as the nominee because he's easier to beat than the incumbent governor. The Democrat there is Laura Kelly, a state senator. Scott Walker is going to be facing off with Tony Evers, who's sort of running on school funding. In Minnesota, we have an out lesbian in the 2nd congressional district, Angie Craig, who was going to oppose Representative Jason Lewis, who has compared LGBTQ people to rapists. Thus far, there are 13 LGBTQ Democrats nominated for Congress in both houses, and that's only so far. In Wisconsin, out lesbian Margaret Engebretson won the Democratic nomination for the 7th congressional district to face Representative Sean Duffy. Anything else we should bring up? I think.
I mean, it's a tremendous number of. It's a pink wave, whatever the Times is calling it.
Yeah.
13 LGBTQ people for federal office in both houses of Congress. That's pretty remarkable to keep track of, even if we can't in specific.
And they're saying that the Times did a story. New York Times did a story this week about how Republican women are almost afraid to run this year. That they're reluctant. They won't want to do it this year with Trump in there. And by the way, speaking of politics, we learned this week that the CEO of Nathan's Hot Dogs and also the big real estate firm Douglas Elliman in New York, one of the 3 biggest, is having a fundraiser for Trump this Friday at his Southampton home. And I called both Nathan's and Douglas Elliman. They don't want to talk about this, but people are calling for boycotts of both companies.
So check in with us before you purchase a Nathan's hot dog again.
I like Nathan's hot dogs, but I won't eat them now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's terrible.
I'm vegetarian, apparently.
All right, let's go on to some other political news. Cynthia Nixon is finally going to have a debate with Andrew Cuomo. She's the, of course, out lesbian candidate. This will be on August 29th on WCBS during your summer vacation, which is the way Andrew Cuomo wants it. The primary is going to be on September 13th, and we commented last week they're doing it on a Thursday. It has to do with the Jewish holiday and the fact that they don't want to have it on September 11th, which is a dark day in history.
Mm-hmm. And the Charlottesville, coming up on the anniversary, there's been anti-racism rallies in Washington, Charlottesville. Roberta Kaplan took over the HRC Twitter to provide updates on the lawsuit against the white supremacy march.
We have a picture there of what went on in Charlottesville, if you can pull that up, of the people marching. A lot of young people. our side outnumbered the racists by like 100 to 1 or more. I mean, they really couldn't pull it together to have these right-wing rallies like they did last year.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that they're on the run. And Roberta's suing them, isn't she?
Yeah, she's representing 10 plaintiffs from that incident. I get cautious to draw too much encouragement from the numbers, but at least they didn't show up in the same forces. And
the Republicans keep nominating Nazi sympathizers. In this case, we got a picture of this guy. They nominated for a state House of Representatives in Missouri, a guy named Steve West from Clay County. He gave an interview last year saying Hitler was right about what was going on in Germany and who was behind it. He identified who was behind it as Jewish cabals. He also made anti-LGBT statements. He says he was taken out of context. He says Jews can be beautiful people, but they're a remnant of a tribe that rejected Christ. Oh, I see. He's Islamophobic, naturally. Missouri Republicans have declared him vile, but he's your candidate. He's up against Democratic incumbent John Carpenter. If you're a Nazi, you can also vote for Arthur Jones for Congress in the 3rd Congressional District of Illinois, where the party also withdrew support. Now, they withdraw support for these candidates, but not for Trump.
That's right.
And he said some bad things this week, too.
He certainly has. Clarksdale, Mississippi passed an LGBT rights law. The city of Clarksdale joining Jackson and Magnolia as the 3rd Mississippi state with non-discrimination protection. Yeah,
Mississippi. We do well in the cities, and Jackson is the capital, and they've done it, and that's terrific. By the way, in Pennsylvania, we told you about that commission that they've got for LGBT, the governor's commission, Governor Wolf. And they were touting it as the first gubernatorial commission, but it was done back in 1975 by Governor Milton Schaap, so it's not the first. Alan LePayover brought this to our attention. He was an assistant to the chair of that commission at the time. Okay, some more Trump stuff. A couple of notes. I'm kind of encouraged that the FCC killed the Sinclair Tribune merger deal. Sinclair Broadcasting being this very big conservative television thing, they stopped that. But they also approved for the first time 100% foreign ownership of 4 radio stations in Alaska and Texas by 2 Australians. That's not good news.
No. And in Illinois, the governor has vetoed a bill that would have expanded the state's non-discrimination law to cover even the smallest businesses. So up until that point, it was covering businesses of 15 employees or more were obligated to comply. It would have proposed to expand that to a business of any size, and he has vetoed it under business sense type objections.
Yeah, I've never heard of exemptions for small businesses from human rights laws. If you in housing, 2 family homes are generally exempt from human rights laws. Mm-hmm. You know, if you have one other apartment in your house, or you want to rent out an apartment in your house, you can rent to whoever you want. That's pretty much across the board.
Well, so under
not bigger.
Title VII of the Civil Rights Law and other federal non-discrimination statutes that the EEOC is charged with applying, they define a business as 15 employees or greater. It was a progressive push on the part of Illinois advocates to expand that to businesses of any size. If you have 4 employees, and especially if you're working for a place that a gelato shop with 3 employees and 1 manager, and you're discriminated against, you can't go to HR. So in some ways,
right,
those protections are even more essential. That the governor has vetoed, saying that this threshold is sort of
well, he's tried to position himself as fairly pro-gay,
right,
Governor Rauner, but and he's up against a formidable Democratic opponent, and now he's saying, I'm not going to go with you on this one. So
yeah,
let's talk about that terrible story out of Achille. Am I saying it right?
It's pronounced,
Oklahoma?
It's pronounced Ashley, which I think is funny because it sounded like
Achille.
Yeah, everyone was saying actually in the videos, but it's Ashley.
All right, this is in Oklahoma, and a 7th grader is transgender girl, and a parent heard about the fact that this kid was at the school and posted something on Facebook, something terrible.
Yeah, she had used the girls' bathroom, and parents, she'd been using the staff bathroom before that. She went to a new school. They hadn't apparently found out where the staff bathroom was. The parents on Facebook said, quote, "You know we have open hunting seasons on them kind, ain't no bag limit in them neither."
Also said a good sharp knife will do the job real quick and make you a real girl. Why don't we run the local news report on this, and you'll learn more about it.
Well, several law enforcement agencies have now stepped in after parents made threats to harm a 12-year-old Atchley ISD student on social media last week. News 12's Kristen Weaver spoke with the girl's mother about what they're doing to move forward.
Atchley schools just reopened their middle school here on Wednesday. It was the 7th graders' first day of school. That's when those parents started making threats all over social media.
She's been living as female for years, and so she started actually living as Maddie, you know, and we had no problems when we first started.
12-year-old Atchley ISD transgender student Maddie's mother, Brandy Rose, says her family moved to Bryan County from Sherman when Maddie was in 5th grade. Trouble started when Maddie was accused by another student of peeping under a bathroom stall.
My daughter leans very far forward to use the bathroom, and so I can understand why someone might see her leaning forward as, oh my gosh, she's trying to look under the stall.
Maddie didn't get in trouble, but started using the staff bathroom and had been doing that for 2 years. That is, until the first day of school Wednesday in the new building.
Before she was able to be told where the staff bathroom was, she had to pee, and she used the girls' bathroom one single time.
One parent found out and took to a private Atchley Facebook group to complain. That's where the threats started. Adults called Maddie by it and thing. Some said she should be stabbed or beat up. One even suggested it was open hunting season for transgender people.
That's scary, and these are adults making threats to a child. I mean, I don't understand it.
Rose tells us her usually upbeat and positive daughter is afraid for her life.
She's just an awesome kid, and to see any kind of fear in her like that, because other people, and especially adults, I can't explain how bad that hurts me.
The sheriff's office says the investigation is still ongoing, but they're taking everything very seriously. Atchley ISD should reopen its doors on Wednesday. Reporting in Atchley, Kristen Weaver, News 12.
And we talked to the superintendent today about the decision to close the school. As a precaution, the Bryan County Sheriff suggested closing the campus Monday and Tuesday. Superintendent Rick Bean agreed. He says there haven't been any problems with Maddie, the transgender child, over the past 2 years until the adults made comments last week. Bean says that he and the school can't control what parents post online.
Atchley School believes that everyone should receive a free and safe education. We have a very talented staff that cares about all of our kids. They take every student as a very special human being with us.
And the sheriff says that the mother filed a protective order against one of those parents that made the comments online. No arrests have been made. However, several agencies, including the FBI, are now investigating to see if any comments constitute a hate crime.
Indeed.
And Mr. Bean, that superintendent, also said, I need education. We all need to be educated, which I think in such a terrible story is kind of a note of.
Yes, yes. I mean, local groups like PFLAG and other groups have offered to help with educating everybody about this, but all schools need to do this. You know, that's what Ann and I used to do for a living at the Hedrick Martin Institute. Go into schools, talk to kids, but talk to staff because they just are afraid of talking about LGBT issues at all.
And so everyone needs competency training for the first time, whether it's coming from your friend group or from your media consumption or from literal workshops in your workplace. So openness to that, I think, is what's going to. You need
permission, and it helps when it comes from the top to talk about it, and people are just afraid to. So that's great. And apparently it turned out that it maybe is only one parent from the school district who said something, and then other people from around the country started chiming in on the Facebook page. But what a heart-wrenching, this is a 7th grader.
Yeah.
And they're trying to turn her into a freak and into an object of violence.
And in other really discouraging news, nationally, ProPublica released a report on misgendering of trans murder victims, or dead naming, as it's called. Laverne Cox, in a statement, gave a very moving Instagram and Twitter post saying, "Being misgendered and dead named in my death, as she was contemplating suicide at a certain point of her life, felt like it would be the ultimate insult to the psychological and emotional injuries I was experiencing daily as a Black trans woman in New York City, the injuries that made me want to take my own life." So, the fact that this is getting attention and that these statistics are coming out should highlight.
We talk about these transgender murders of transgender women, mostly women of color, every week. But we're apparently only talking about the tip of the iceberg because so many are misgendered.
Right.
I mean, this ProPublica study looked at 65 agencies investigating murders of transgender, misgendered them in 74 authorities, misgendered them in 74 out of 85 cases. Now, they did say that arrests have been made in 55% of the cases, which may not sound like much, but apparently the overall rate for arresting someone in murder is 59% overall. But anyway, in Detroit, there was a trans woman named Kimora Stuball, and she survived harassment. This guy came up to her and was harassing her, and then he pulls the gun out. So she grabs the gun, and it goes off, and it hits her. And his defense is, and she got shot in the shoulder. His lawyer says, "Oh, he didn't intend to shoot." Whew. The prosecution says it was a hate crime, but LGBT people are not covered in Detroit or Michigan, so they're calling it ethnic intimidation and gender on the basis of gender. They're making it a hate crime, but wow,
Right.
it is tough out there.
Completely. Clark County, Nevada adopted policy to protect trans students. On the other side of things, following the passage of Nevada's anti-bullying state law, which requires schools to create policy to address the needs of gender diverse students.
Yeah, we get a lot of good policies, but a lot of good policies in New York. But I'm going to a conference in a couple of weeks in New York about bullying, even though we've had an anti-bullying law and civil rights protections for a long time. You have to really do a lot of work in the schools in order to get this under control.
Yeah, and it's a divisive issue in Nevada. They've been trying to, it looks like, get this thing through despite raucous public forums for the past, several months. So the parents get up in arms.
It passed 4-3.
It passed, in a split decision, in ruling that students they have three options: use the locker room or restroom consistent with their gender identity, use the room correspondent to their sex assigned at birth, or come up with another individual plan. That also applies to students who go on overnight field trips, which in my experience is a hellish prospect, even under the most cisgendered of circumstances. So.
Nice to see what LeBron James did this week. Of course, he's under attack from President Trump, but he featured the stars of the television series Pose about transgender life, house life in the 80s, on a list of women his daughter looks up to. That was nice.
It's really sweet.
And also in Indiana, a federal judge ordered Evansville School District to allow a trans student who's 17 to use the men's room. This guy had to sue over being forced to use the women's room or the nurse's office room. So here's someone who presents as a man, as a boy, and he's forced to go to the girls' room in their school, but not now under this federal order.
Right. In other news, we note the passing of Richard Sipe.
Yes.
Am I saying that right, Sipe?
Sorry?
I'm saying that right,
Richard Sipe. Yeah, I've talked to him. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, his influential conclusion, he studied and wrote about sexual abuse in the Catholic Church for many years.
Pretty much the foremost expert, a former priest who ended up marrying a former nun, which often happens.
Yeah, from what I understand, he went into the church, with idealism, and was so scandalized by all of the rampant cover-ups and the sexual abuse that he found that he developed a passion for this. His conclusion was that the two phenomena are linked, of celibacy, which requires, which is so often broken that it creates a culture of duplicity and cover-up and secrecy, which then enables a culture of child sexual
And
abuse.
as he pointed out, including by the bishops and cardinals themselves. So they have this secret, so they're not about to investigate it for others. I mean, I was told many years ago that whenever there was a bishops' meeting, half of them had their boyfriends with them. You know, and of course, a lot of the stuff that's uncovered is it's not all male on male. Some of it, much of it, is on girls as well. But he ultimately concluded that about 6% of Catholic priests abused children, and that about half the priests were sexually active. And he gave this to the bishops in 1986, and they just ignored it.
Yeah.
They put it aside. And
this comes on the heels, obviously, of this enormous grand jury report that's come out from Pennsylvania, reporting that thousands of children have been abused over the
well,
past
they documented
decades.
1,000 over the last 70 years, and about 300 priests being involved in it, and the complicity of the police in it. But of course, that's just the tip of the iceberg. These are just the ones who have come forward.
Right. And there's a push in the wake of that report to change the statute of limitation laws, which has long been a demand of advocates for victims.
They've demanded it in New York, and they can't get it because the Republican Senate in New York stops it. So, folks, if you get a Democratic Senate in the New York State, you might be able to pass that bill. But going back to this report, which is horrifying, one priest raped a girl in a hospital after she had her tonsils out. Another got a 17-year-old pregnant and was allowed to stay in ministry after faking a marriage certificate and then divorcing her. And they say it's unlikely that criminal charges are going to be brought as a result of this because the statute of limitations is up on them. This was a big grand jury report. It should be done in every state, and it should all be rooted out. And there's a lot of criticism of Pope Francis for not disciplining the bishops over this, which he's reluctant to do. The only one they've gone after is this guy Ted McCarrick, who was the Cardinal of Washington recently. You read about that, but SIPE warned about McCarrick in 2009.
Yeah.
And then we should do that Franklin, Indiana story at Roncalli High School.
Yes.
Now, do you know who Roncalli is? That was the real name of Pope John the 23rd, who died in the early 60s. Anyway, it's a Catholic high school. This woman was a guidance counselor, Shelley Fitzgerald, and she married a woman in 2014, and she's been at the school for 15 years. They just found out she was married to a woman. So she was put on paid administrative leave. They say the staff must follow the teachings of the Catholic Church, and she was offered a choice between resign or divorce that woman. Well, now the Catholics believe in divorce when it comes to this. Indiana law has a ministerial exception to the human rights law, as many places do. And the question is, if she's a guidance counselor and she's not doing religious counseling, is she covered by the ministerial exception?
Right. Open question.
And many students are supporting her.
Yeah. A student has said apparently that the Roncalli rebels are not to blame, but in fact the Archdiocese
is that the name of their is that their name?
That
the
is their
Roncalli
name.
rebels?
The Roncalli rebels, and if they are rebelling against anything, it's not the homophobic doctrines of the Catholic Church. But we'll see how that plays out.
We will. It's happening everywhere.
In another headline from earlier, we have a lesbian NYU professor.
Oh, this story. All right, folks.
Who's been
fasten your seatbelts. Go ahead.
It's a tough one. She has been suspended for sexual harassment.
Let's put her picture up. Her name is Anita Ronell. Right?
Yes, and Avital Ronell. It looks like she's Israeli.
I'm sorry, Avital.
Right. At first I thought it was the same name as Rachel Weisz in Disobedience, but it is in fact not. She is at NYU. She's a star philosopher, essentially. There aren't too many of them, and she's one of them. Found guilty by an 11-month Title IX investigation of sexual harassment, but not of assault, stalking, and retaliation, which she was also accused of.
Okay. So the student who complained, we'll put his picture up. His name is Nimrod Reitman. Is that it? Is that right? Yes, Nimrod Reitman. And he complained for several years that he received dozens of emails from her referring to him as my most adored one, my sweet cuddly baby, my cock or spaniel, spelled that way. my astounding and beautiful Nimrod, and that she touched him repeatedly and slept in his bed. Now, all right, she denies it, of course, although she has been suspended for a year after an investigation. Some feminist scholars defended her and called him malicious. He's now married to a man.
He's posted at Harvard. The critics are also complaining. I mean, what's resonant about this case is that the defense from the largely feminist intellectual academia critics or supporters of Ronell are saying their defenses echo in many ways what defenders of men accused in the Me Too movement said. So he didn't come forward until 2 years after he left NYU. They're saying, why did you wait so long? They're saying he wants attention. Her response, which I may take the liberty to read, our communications. This is Ronell's defense. Our communications, which Reitman now claims constituted sexual harassment, were between two adults, a gay man and a queer woman, who share an Israeli heritage, as well as a penchant for florid and campy communications arising from our common academic background.
Right, but he said one of his first encounters with her was he was told to meet her in Paris, and he ended up at her place, and and she said, "Oh, sleep in my bed," and and he said, "Look, you're my professor. Don't do this." Now that's his story. And that's her story, but there was an investigation. I've also, I heard from one of our viewers, Carla J., a very prominent professor and lesbian academic. She says, her tendency too is to believe the accusers, but she thinks that when a woman is found guilty of it, there's a lot more attention to it than there is when there are men who do this.
Yeah. I mean, it's always important to look at how the disproportionate kind of ways these cases are handled, even as we look at the just sort of amazing details of the case.
Yes, it is quite a story. It was on the front page of the New York Times. All right. In Orlando, several gay and lesbian people were hit by paintballs on July 27th. We're just learning about this at Lake Eola Park. And at the local gay bar, at the Savoy Orlando, cars with Human Rights Campaign stickers on them were hit with paintballs. And this is the city of the Pulse massacre, so it's obviously got people nervous. And police are investigating it as a possible hate crime.
That's right. A new study finds that Latino millennials are most likely of any millennials to identify as LGBTQ. The Gen Forward survey project at the University of Chicago reports that 22% of Latino young people identify as queer or trans, almost twice as many as any other demographic they looked at, which was 1,900 people between 18 and 34.
I wonder why that is. We will have to get a Latinx expert in to talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay. Study from UCLA on conversion therapy found that almost 700,000 have undergone some form of it in the United States, but they can't possibly be counting all the people who grow up in these anti-gay religions where you're browbeaten into heterosexuality if they can. 14 states have banned that for minors, and New York City and other jurisdictions classify it as consumer fraud, so you can't do it with adults either. Stop it. Okay.
The Mormon Church...
what did they do now?
Well, they did something very quietly, but I found it interesting. They released an updated handbook called Preach My Gospel, a sequel, a follow-up to Call Me By Your Name, maybe, which goes to every missionary around the world, 70,000 Mormons. And in this new updated handbook, it codifies what's called their November policy, which came out in 2015 in the wake of Obergefell, making it very clear that children of same-sex parents and households could not have standing in the Mormon Church until they were outside of...
That's not very nice.
It's a tough one. It's a hardline stance. And a student at BHU, an openly gay Mormon, said at the time of the policy, if you want to be gay and Mormon, okay, but you have to be Mormon. And you can't really be gay.
Well, I would say it's time to
leave. There it is,
I've turned in my card from the Catholic Church, I guess, I can't even remember the year. It was a long time ago. In Atlanta, a landscaper denied service to a same-sex married couple. This guy, his name is Stuart Dureno of Botanica Atlanta Landscape Design, called their marriage a delusion. But, there's a law against discrimination in Atlanta for LGBT people, so I wonder if they will take him up on that. Another study about U.S. hospitals, 1 in 6 hospitals is now Catholic in the United States. Because there's all this consolidation going on, and they glom onto them and they get them. And in some states, 30% of the care is from Catholic hospitals. And, they have all these policies that we don't do certain things, especially women's reproductive stuff. Now, we know that they're not going to do abortions, but they also won't do tubal ligations, and they are not good to transgender people in terms of service. And many even discourage abortion referrals. So this is a huge problem in the United States. Okay.
Moving into international news.
Shall we? Yes, let's do that.
Let's do it. We've got a picture of this. A 16-year-old in Russia was convicted under a gay propaganda law. The Russian LGBT network who provided his lawyer said that authorities may have pursued charges following the teenager's involvement in an event called Gays or Putin.
Well, his name is Maxim Neverov, and he's quite a hero. Put his picture back up there. This kid is something. They accused him of posting nude pictures of men on a social network porn site. He said he posted pictures of men hugging each other and things like that. And he vows to go on with his activism. He was fined $738, which is apparently like more than a month's wages or something in some of these places. And he says he submitted 12 applications for public events, including one to make Putin a saint. He did that as a joke, but they're not taking it that way. So he's got lawyers from the Russia LGBT network, and he's being persecuted for organizing these kinds of events. So good on you, Maxim Neverov. He says, the police don't scare me. Anyway, if he doesn't pay the fine, by the way, he gets a 14-day sentence.
Yeah.
All right.
Which you don't want to do in a Russian prison, in the midst of the terrible crackdown and hunger strikes taking place.
Right.
There already.
Okay. Other international news.
In Australia, the New South Wales Police Commissioner apologized publicly for past police department brutality. This is on the 40th anniversary of their 1978, the first gay Mardi Gras, where revelers, protesters were brutally attacked by the police. They call themselves the 78ers. And in this case, and
they threw 178 people into jail and violently assaulted them. I had never heard of this incident.
Yeah.
Sorry, Australia. I hadn't heard of it before. It's horrifying.
Well, and it's funny you say that. I mean, Australia has a pretty intense history of saying I'm sorry. They have an I'm sorry day, and it seems like their approach to culpability and public accountability is this is not the first time that a police affiliate has apologized for the 78 incident. In 2016, they had an LGBTI spokesman who was a representative who also apologized to everyone, and both of them gave really eloquent and completely accountability taking. I mean, really eloquent's a bit of a stretch.
One of our demands in New York is getting an apology from the police department,
Yeah.
at least for the Stonewall assault on the Stonewall. But I mean, the history of arresting gay people and trapping gay men, some of which still goes on in many places, but also in New York. And there's never really been a movement in this country for not only apologies, but reparations for all the sodomy convictions. There are men my age who were arrested for sodomy, who had their lives ruined over it. Yeah. So anyway, good on you in Australia for making that happen.
Turkey has announced that they will not once again participate in Eurovision over the presence of gay and trans performers. Eurovision, if you're anti-gay and trans, you're just not going to enjoy it.
Turkey seems to be retreating more and more from Europe. I mean, they're part of the the union, and they're kowtowing to their religious conservatives at this point.
Yeah, I mean, for LGBT rights in Turkey, it's looking, certainly they're trying to hide it more. They banned Pride in 2015, and then the film festival in Ankara was erased, and now Eurovision. So We're hoping they rejoin the party soon.
Now, Cuba, we keep telling you that they're putting forth marriage equality. It's apparently going to a referendum now on February 24th after clearing the National Assembly. But some of the Cuban dissidents who have been fighting the Cuban government for years over its repression, and of course they were very repressive on gay stuff, not that we weren't, but they're basically calling this like pinkwashing. You know, they're trying to show the world that they're more liberal by doing this gay thing, but they're still locking up people who protest the government, et cetera. So we will see how that progresses.
In Malaysia, 2 women are sentenced to public caning for having sex with one another. Gay sex is banned in the country, which groups it together with bestiality in a list of offenses which are against the order of nature.
Horrible. And they were also, beyond being caned, were fined $800. And if they failed to pay their fine, they go to prison for 4 months. And $800 is a lot of money there.
Yeah.
All right, this is one of my favorite stories of the week. In British Columbia, a Christian university, Trinity Western, they voted to drop their covenant with their students that forbids sex outside of marriage. All right? And why did they do this? Because they want to accredit their law school, and there are these law societies that say, if you're going to treat people this way, we're not going to certify you. We're not going to accredit you. So, and they're building it off a Supreme Court of Canada decision in June that said requiring a person to behave contrary to their sexual identity is degrading and disrespectful. And so the law societies have the right to deny accreditation in these cases. So the school's still going to make it a voluntary covenant for that students, but they don't have to do it. So LGBT advocates are not totally satisfied, because they say that creates still a policy of intolerance.
Yeah.
But can you imagine if a case like this got to the Supreme Court of the United States at this point from a religious school? I mean, at this point, I don't think we would win.
But it's sometimes helpful to have LGBT rights weighed in the balance with the desire to have the law school tuitions as part of your underline.
Yes. And to get the people who graduate from your school, become lawyers in these various jurisdictions. That's why they do it.
Another note in Australia, at risk of putting too positive a spin on things to the expense of others, an Australian Senator, Fraser Anning, called for a white ethno-state and a
separate white ethno-state within Australia? Or he wants the whole country to be a white ethno-state?
Yeah.
Like Trump wants here.
Yeah, he's a Trumpist and called for a final solution, which in his case is a popular vote, but a voted choice of words.
Final solution. Did he know of what he speaks?
Well, if he didn't know, it was quickly pointed out to him. And in Japan, Robert Campbell, a TV celebrity and scholar of Japanese literature, publicly came out to, he's been, gay for ages, he's not a young man, but
he's been with his partner for 20 years and he's just coming out.
And for noble reason, I mean...
And he married the guy in the United States.
In response to a string of anti-LGBT comments that Japanese lawmakers have been making.
Well, yeah, it's weird. These are like lower-level legislators in Japan who are making these. And what did they say that was so anti-gay? Gay people are unproductive. That was the insult to us. And this has gotten people out in the streets in Japan, and it's got this guy to come out of the closet after all these years, which is terrific. I mean, and it goes back to what we were talking about with the school and not being able to talk about these issues. Now Japan is talking about these issues because they didn't talk about it at all. They were so reticent about talking about homosexuality. Now, because we're being attacked, people are coming out and responding, which is very encouraging to see.
We have a new new High Commissioner for Human Rights at the UN, Michelle Bachelet.
Yeah, we got a picture of her, don't we?
We do.
We have a picture of her with the Secretary General of the United Nations, Guterres.
Accepting her new post. She's served as the president of Chile between 2006 and 2010, and then again 2014 and 2018. They've had an interesting handoff of administrations between the same conservative president with whom she exchanged the title. And she's got a really interesting history. She's been very pro LGBT. She pushed through a gay marriage bill. She introduced the gay marriage bill in 2017 with no hopes of getting it passed necessarily, but made the gesture. She did, as a big accomplishment, get the abortion exceptions bill passed.
Yes, and she, obviously, and she was the first woman president, and of course a big advocate of women's rights. She had worked as a pediatrician and as a public health advocate, but in the Pinochet regime, which was the fascist regime that the United States installed there when they wanted to get rid of Allende under Kissinger and Nixon, her father was imprisoned and tortured, and she and her mother were imprisoned and tortured in Chile.
Yeah.
And of course, she became their president. And so she sounds like a terrific choice for the human rights post. The guy going out, and I apologize for not remembering his name, said a lot of things that rubbed the Trump administration the wrong way. But he says, if you have this job, you have got to speak out about these things. Otherwise, you might as well get rid of the position.
Yeah, totally. In AIDS news,
well, we've got a couple more international things, if you don't
Please.
mind. In Italy, the deputy prime minister, Matteo Salvini, and he's from the far right Northern League Party, an anti-immigrant party. He called same-sex parents unnatural. He called surrogacy a horror. He's the Ministry of the Interior. The first thing he did when he came in was they have these electronic ID cards that say parent 1 and parent 2. He immediately changed it to mother and father. He is a piece of work, and he's got a lot of power there in Italy. I worry about them. And in Poland, the defense minister called the LGBTQ Pride event a parade of sodomites. His name is Mariusz Blaszczak, and he went after the 5,000 people who marched in a city called Poznan. And he's upset about Poznan because they have a local government that opposes the increasingly fascist regime in Poland. I'm really scared about what's happening in Europe. Growing up, heard about the Nazis, and you heard about how horrible things, and you know how well Germany turned out afterwards, and then you see everything just drifting back, and it's really frightening. All right, is that it for international news? It may be.
That's what
Oh, well, they're going to have the Catholic World Meeting of Families in Dublin. And the Pope is going on August 25th. The global network of Rainbow Catholics were denied a booth, but they are going to have this guy, James Martin, who is not openly gay, a Jesuit who wants dialogue on the subject. But there are 11,000 right-wingers who've signed a petition against even him speaking. And so...
there's not enough space for everyone's booths, apparently.
I see. Well, I hope they set up a booth outside.
Yeah.
Then that would
certainly
be good. And okay, let's talk about AIDS news.
In AIDS news, the AIDS Healthcare Foundation has given $10 million, adding to an existing $2 million to a rent control ballot initiative, Prop 10.
That's wild, I think. There is a rent control thing there, and the real estate people are obviously fighting it tooth and nail.
They've got a
but
lot
for
of
the
money.
AIDS Healthcare Foundation to step in with $10 million, wow. But, it's... they do controversial things, and they do get involved with these ballot initiatives. And of course, affordable housing is a very big AIDS issue.
Of course, yeah. I mean, and they, I don't have the exact details here, but they own some affordable housing, or they operate some affordable housing units themselves. And, housing is obviously a healthcare and queer justice issue. So, I mean, it's something to keep an eye on. They also poured in 2016 a lot of money into a drug cap proposition, which failed.
Okay, there's also a lot of controversy about, are you ready for this? I hadn't heard about this. The
Yeah,
molecular surveillance of HIV, which the CDC is scaling up. It means analyzing the genetic sequence of the virus that you get so that they can identify clusters of transmissions. And it's meant to help tailor HIV care, therapy, and prevention. The advocates are worried that it might be misused with all these HIV criminalization laws. The CDC says don't worry about that, but you never know once it's in the database. And they say they're going to protect it. But one of the things that they're finding among these clusters, among MSMs, is that Latinx rates are going up, black rates are leveling, and white rates continue to decline. All right.
Yeah.
Entertainment news.
Very interesting. So in entertainment news, we've got a Twitter event, Army Hammer of Straight White Men, and
well, let's say
Call
what
Me by
Straight
Your
White Men
Name.
is. This is a play that
Yeah.
Ann and I gave a bad review to, but there it is. So what happened?
Well, someone during Kate Bornstein's opening line.
Kate Bornstein opens the show, an out transgender woman with another transgender actor. They sort of frame the show.
Right.
Yeah, there's Kate in the background there with the other, I apologize for not having the other transgender actor's name. There's Armie Hammer there, one of the straight white men on the couch.
Yes.
But what did this audience member do?
A compelling performance of sleeping there. Kate, who uses they pronouns, I believe, was heckled by an audience member who said, I'm paraphrasing, but saying like, you don't belong here.
You're not welcome here. Kate had said, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and the rest of us, which is her line, which she actually uses outside of the show. And then apparently this woman, was it a woman?
Yes.
With her husband, booed throughout the show.
Yeah, continued to heckle. And Armie Hammer posted, I think this is very interesting, the disparate responses to it. Armie posted to the woman in our audience who felt it was appropriate to yell, "You're not welcome here at Kate Bornstein, our beloved friend, coworker, and now family member, ... Feel free never to come back." And Josh Charles, another of the straight white men in the performance added, and also feel free to go. I'm not sure if I can say it.
You just say the F word. You would not say the whole thing.
And so that was a pretty, that's a response that is being praised. Armie Hammer is a crusader for LGBT rights, of course. But Kate Bornstein's response I thought was even more interesting. They said, "I've been chewing that over, and the best that I can come up with is that one of her children or grandchildren has gone through a gender transition that troubled her greatly, to the point that she just boiled over when I took the stage. Look, Straight White Men is a great work of art, and great art does upset people. It happens all the time. Please know that I'm not upset or afraid. I'm more than ever proud to be part of this show." So Kate's response was to empathize with the, whatever pain they could imagine that woman, that heckler, was going through, and then just reaffirm that they were proud of the work that they're doing and show a strong front to it, which I think is which is a very a noble response.
Well, it goes back to why are people acting out when they're prejudiced like this? I mean, there was always a big controversy over the word homophobia or transphobia or Islamophobia. He was good friends with George Weinberg, who coined the term homophobia in the 60s, a non-gay man. And we had discussions about it because I said, it's just anti-gay prejudice. It's not fear. He said, no, the basis of this action is people are afraid.
Yeah.
He said, when a dog snarls at you, it's afraid of you. That's what he said. So it's an interesting phenomenon. We're trying to get to the root of it. And of course, all of this stuff is coming out more and more these days. People being more and more free to express their prejudices.
Right.
Have you run into anything like that?
In
people on the street, I mean, just feel free to say things to people and attack people and say, and just make comments or hit them with paintballs.
Totally. Yeah,
in Orlando.
I think it's a crucial issue in public discourse, whether to respond to, this idea of should we respond nonviolently to things with empathy and education, outreach, or and treat aggression as an expression of your own unmet needs, or respond with pain oneself. And I think it goes back and forth. Homophobia interestingly segues us to the next topic. We have a Jack Whitehall, a British comedian, who's been cast to play Disney's first gay character in a film called
Disney's first official gay character.
Disney's first official gay character. This is a Tumblr slide of him doing a stand-up bit from a while ago, saying it's not a very good joke. Well, I guess I'm homophobic in the same sense that I'm arachnophobic. I'm not scared of spiders, just like I'm not scared of gay people, but I would scream if either showed up in my shower.
Oh.
Which,
Pretty, I was going to use a handicapist expression, but I'm not going to. It's awful. But the controversy is casting. Of course, this gay character is apparently a gay man who is hugely effeminate and very campy, and they're having him playing. So Omar Sharif Jr., who's out gay, is criticizing the Mouse for casting a non-gay actor playing a gay stereotype. Look, Tony Kushner said he was upset when people attacked the idea of Andrew Garfield playing a main gay role and winning the Tony Award in Angels in America. He says, no, I would never ask an actor about their sexual orientation. But I do think that people who have experience bring things to the role that others don't.
Right.
Although acting should be about anything, but where do you draw the line on that?
I mean, absolutely. I think Omar Sharif Jr. said it well, that it's a representation issue and not an acting issue. It's not a question of Jack Whitehall's acting ability, although I may hold that in question. It's an issue of availability of parts and the sort of immense impact it could have. Disney, a company that's gearing its audience toward young people, to have an openly gay role model playing a gay character. And obviously they're just, I also saw someone say, if all things were equal, any actor should play any role. But it's not. It's not like trans actors are getting called into the room to audition for cis roles, and likewise.
Well, of course, Scarlett Johansson was cast in that transgender role, and a lot of that is, and with Andrew Garfield as well, they're stars.
Right.
And they want to sell the movie with a star, and we don't have a lot of gay stars, although the entire cast of Boys in the Band is openly gay.
Yeah, it's a fine line to walk.
Which is unusual.
Yeah. I haven't seen it.
Okay, talk about Batwoman while we have about 3 minutes left.
Yeah, two sort of parallel issues here. Batwoman, Ruby Rose was announced to play the lesbian superhero. Yeah, we've got a picture. This is a screen grab from Ruby's announcement on Instagram. We also have her just very excited and warm, effervescent response.
So now tell me about her. Batwoman's going to be a lesbian, right?
Yeah, so the copy from the CW.
Also?
Armed with a passion for social justice and a flair for speaking her own mind, Kate Kane soars onto the streets of Gotham as Batwoman, an out lesbian and highly trained street fighter.
And what about the actress, Ruby?
Yeah, she's
also
queer as the day is long, and has been for a long time. And she really reacted with umbrage to the suggestion that she wasn't lesbian enough for the role.
Really? Oh, really?
Yeah, her response was, there were 3 critiques.
Did somebody say that?
3 critiques of her casting. One is that she's not a lesbian, one is that she's not Jewish, and one is that she doesn't have the acting chops to pull off the role well. And she responded to saying, "It's just so offensive to me. I've been out forever that you would say." And so she has now announced that she's retiring from Twitter.
Retiring from Twitter, but not acting.
No, she's going to play that role, yeah.
She took a lot of abuse on Twitter, and she had to close her account.
Yeah, exactly.
So where was most of the abuse coming from? From our community?
Right. So that's
really?
that's the sort of the interesting twist to the story. It's and it's a potent issue of, are we too hard on our own? In the in the effort to see justice in the world.
Well, we have rules at our meetings for reclaiming pride about treating each other with gentleness and not attacking each other, just trying to deal with the issues when we do it. And by the way, we'll do that. Oh, we're out of time? Okay. Yeah, well, thanks for being with us, Rachel.
It's been a pleasure, yeah.
And if you want to run the closing of the gay games from Paris, you can do that over the credits. Good night.